guys doing all right? I think I haven't done it in a bit. I'm going to give you an eye update because I had some good stuff happen. And to catch you up, if you're new or don't know all the whining I have been doing for the past few months. In March, I had this thing called Fuchs dystrophy, which means your corneas degrade over time, and everything starts being fuzzy. There aren't sharp edges on objects or things, and glare is crazy, and driving at night is really stupid. And so earlier in the year, my doctor sent me to a specialist, and we started the process of trying to fix that. And in March, I had a cornea transplant in my left eye, where they took out one layer of the cornea, brought in a donor cornea from somebody else who was no longer needing it, and put it in my eye. I assume they no longer needed it. I really didn't ask. Put in the donor layer of cornea and an air bubble to hold everything in place and wake up the other cornea. And a week later, they had to go in and put in a to sleep again and put in a second bubble because the first bubble wasn't working right. And then a month after that, I had a laser procedure on that left eye to clear out the scar tissue. And then about 3 weeks ago, I had the cornea transplant in my right eye, and that one went better. There was no extra need for a second bubble, matter of fact, they had too much air. But there was a problem before we even started because I'm right-eyed. I'm right-eye dominant. And so when I lost my right eye, I lost my ability to read because my left eye, the astigmatism is still so strong, I can't read things that are right here. So I had to go like 2 or 3 weeks without being able to read, which is for some of you like not being able to breathe or eat. Okay, so anything I do on a computer, I have to sit at the computer. I got the monitor right here and the font like this huge, and look, it was fun. But anyway, so everybody's praying, everybody's walking, and then Monday morning, it had been 3 weeks after the surgery, I woke up and I'm playing, because this is what people do, I'm playing a game on my phone, right? And I look at it and I go, that is the sharpest image I have ever seen on my phone. And then I pull over and I can read, and everything's really awesome up close now. So I knocked out 2 books this week, just because. And so that's really cool. I still can't wear my glasses to preach because I'm nearsighted, and I have these $15 glasses I got on Amazon so I could drive. And they're roughly the right prescription, but I can't get new glasses for about 3 more weeks. So I still have to preach without glasses so I can sort of see you guys. I'm better. I can make it, like Marlene, I got you. I can tell that's Marlene. Some of it's just, the way your hair is and everything else, but I can figure out some of you are, I got nothing. I can't see. But anyway, I just wanted to give you an update. Thank you guys for all the prayers. Things are working forward, and hopefully by the end of the month, I'll have new glasses that are bifocals so I can and really see sharp everything. And it's been not the most fun trip I've ever taken, but it's going to be rewarding, and I'm kind of excited about getting my new glasses, and I'm not whining as much. And so anyway, we're doing a series called Characters, and just to catch you up from last week, I don't really need to catch you up from last week. That's the point of the series, Characters. Characters is we're going to go 1 character per week and talk about somebody in the Bible because it's summer and you guys are taking off all over the place and you're here 1 week and you're somewhere else the next. And so if I try to build something, you're all going to go, oh, no, I didn't get that one. So each week is really independent. It's just a character from the Bible. And I do want to give you one thing just in last week because I thought, well, I can read, so I might as well be in teaching mode. You know what I'm saying? So last week we talked about, we had a character from the book of Judges named Deborah. And we went through Deborah, and I gave you, and I was thinking, I'm going to jump all the way to 1 Kings this week. So would you guys mind if I give you kind of a Bible overview to get you to here so you know, because a lot of times we kind of assume you know how the Bible works, and a lot of times you might not, or you had it in a class when you were young, and you may or may not remember it. Okay, so I'm going to give you just 5 minutes. You mind 5 minutes? I'm just going to walk you through how the Bible goes to start with. And you guys, you probably know this. Oops, got to turn it on. Do that. Down here, I want red, and I want big, so you can see it. And the Bible starts with the book of Genesis, Book of Beginnings, it's all the early stuff, sets everything up. And then come 4 books that are kind of sometimes fascinating and sometimes boring and amazing, and Exodus to Deuteronomy, and that's the Moses stuff. And we talk about Moses stuff a lot, right? Moses rescues the people out of Egypt, all that stuff. Then we get to Joshua, and Joshua is the dude who takes them from the wilderness into the promised land, right? And what's next? Yeah, we talked about that last week. And we said Judges is basically the Articles of a Confederation. If you're a history buff, it's the Articles of Confederation for the Jewish nation. They haven't quite figured out how to be a country yet. You know, they got their independence, but they're figuring the whole thing out. So that's Judges. That's where we were last week, was Judges. And then come 2 books. I'm running out of room for 1st and 2nd Samuel. We'll call it Sammy for short. And 1st and 2nd Samuel primarily deal with the first 2 kings of Israel. A guy named Saul, who you may have heard of, and a guy named David, who you have heard of, right? David is the one God picks. This is the man after my own heart. God promises Messiah will come through David, and we have this kingdom that's now going to last forever because they've got the right king, right? That's how it's going to go. We got the new king, we got the right king. Everything's just going to go smooth sailing all the way to Messiah, right? Well, not exactly. Because the next 2 books are 1st and 2nd Kings, where we're going to land today. And in 1st Kings, David has a son's name's Solomon. Yes, someone got it? All right, Solomon. Solomon is the wisest man in the world who does some of the dumbest things in the world. Okay, he was really smart in some ways and total idiot in others. And when he dies, instead of one kingdom coming out of that, 10 of the 12 states, we'll call them states instead of tribes, 10 of the 12 states split. They have a non-peaceful but not as bloody as it could have been revolution, civil war, and they split into 2 nations. One nation gets to keep the name. They're the northern kingdom, and they're named Israel. You've heard of them, right? That's the name you think of when you think of Jewish nation. You think Israel. But this king, the northern king, got to keep the name. The southern kingdom got to keep the king. So they are called Judah for the tribe that was dominant. And Judah, anybody know anybody who was from the tribe of Judah? Don't go to the finale first. Let's go work our way up to it. David was from the tribe of Judah. Solomon, the tribe of Judah. All the kings are from the line of Judah. And then the finale, there's one dude from the line of Judah. And you say it now. Jesus. Jesus ends up from the line of Judah. And so these 2, the books of 1st and 2nd Kings, are basically the story of these 2 kingdoms. Sometimes they're fighting. Sometimes they're playing well together. You just never know which is going to be happening. But Israel is really messed up. And when we come to today, we're going to be focusing on the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Israel, and they are screwing up massively. Massively because they have this brand new, fresh out of the box king. And you probably never heard of the king. His name is Ahab, unless you're a Bible geek. But you know his wife, Jezebel. Even if you didn't know that she was a bad person, I'm going to just erase that before I spell it even worse. All right? Even if I didn't tell you ahead of time that Jezebel was a bad person, you know up front Jezebel's a bad person. Just because anybody here named their daughter Jezebel. Was it on anybody's list of, right? Yeah, that's right up there with Adolf, right? You're just not using that one. Okay? So we come to our part of 1 Kings in 1 Kings chapter 17. And God sent this prophet to kind of harass Ahab, to push him toward God. Ahab's not going to move toward God, but the prophet named Elijah is going to be pushing Ahab toward God and trying to push the people toward God. It doesn't work very well, but he keeps trying because that's what God called him to do. Sometimes God calls you to something that you're actually not going to do that great at because he just wants you to be providing his voice in a situation. So at the very beginning of chapter 17, Elijah goes to Ahab and says, okay, you have screwed up enough. It will not rain again until I say so. And then he leaves. And guess what happens? It doesn't rain. Now, let's put yourself in King Ahab's shoes. Are you pleased with Elijah at this moment? No. What is your number one goal in life at this moment? Find and torture this guy until he prays for rain. I mean, that's your sum total of what you're looking for in life right now. Find him. So God, first off, sends him. I can give you a map. You like maps? I like maps. Sends him. They are over here in an area called Shechem and that area here. God sends him on the other side of the Jordan River to a little creek. They use the word brook. Does anybody use the word brook in conversation? If you read the Bible, it talks about that Elijah is by this brook. And I've never used the word brook in life unless I'm talking about somebody and that's their name. All right, but so it's a creek. Or if you're from where I'm from, in some of the hollers, it's a creek. Okay? So Elijah is by the creek, and he's by this creek for a while. We don't know exactly how long, but there's a famine going on. It's not raining, so there's no rain, there's no food. But these ravens show up every day. It's kind of freaky, and bring him food. Every day, a couple times a day, he gets, what do you call it? When you get food delivery? He gets DoorDash, right? Okay, if I'd have thought of that earlier, it would have been funnier. He gets DoorDash a couple times a day from some ravens. Well, the problem is it's not raining. What happens to creeks if it never, ever rains? They dry up, okay? So, sometime later, the brook dried up. Creek dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him. Go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. Now, two things come to me when I read that verse right off the bat. The first one, the second one is, there's a widow going to supply me with food. I'm going to say with some rich woman. All right, there is some rich widow in Zarephath, and she's loaded, and I'm going to move into her guest room, and it's going to be a sweet stay for the rest of this famine. He's wrong. The second thing, actually the first thing that I wonder is, Zara what? Is there a doctor in the house? Zarephath? Okay, let's go back to our map. We talked about this last week with the kings. We were down in this area. Here's the Sea of Galilee. You guys know the Sea of Galilee. If you see any map of Israel, there's a Sea of Galilee leading down to the Dead Sea down here, right? Do you know where Zarephath is on this map? It's not. Let's zoom out some. Zarephath, now here you move up, you're up to here. This is the northern part of the kingdom of Israel. Zarephath is here. He leaves Israel completely. God sends him completely out of the country because, well, Ahab's looking for him. But he still can't be too public because Ahab's looking for him. Okay? So, he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, he starts looking around for a widow. That's the instructions. And a widow was there gathering sticks. I don't know if she had a sign, but he knew she was a widow. You ever wonder those things? How did he know that? He called to her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink? And as she was going to get it, he called, and please bring me a piece of bread. Just, run in, open the loaf, grab me a piece of bread and some water. Is that cool? Well, of course, that's not how the bread was. Bread was something, they just mix it up themselves, cook it over a fire. They didn't even bake it. They would roast it over a fire and make the loaf into bread. So, and he's thinking, this should be easy because God sent me to her so she could take care of me. And she replied, as surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home so I can have a fire and make a meal for myself and my son that we may eat it and die. This is our Last Supper. God has sent him to a woman who is about to have her last meal with her child so they can then die of starvation. This is one of those raise your hands. God, you sure about this one? Okay. And so what, you ever think about this? Why send him to her there? If he wanted to die of starvation, there were options that didn't involve going all the way to Zarephath, that didn't involve leaving the country, that didn't even involve specifically moving to a place where they didn't even worship the true God, where they worshiped Baal, the false god. And God sends him into the center of Baal worship to a broke widow. Well, see, God's sneaky. All these Baal worshipers in Zarephath, he can't do a big city, because if he does it in a big city, word will get out, it'll get back to Ahab, Ahab will come north. He's got a few years to go in this story. We're not done. So he sends him to a little town where all these Baal worshipers are starving, except this one widow who somehow keeps going. So Elijah says to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you've said. But first, before you feed your son, this is some bold stuff right here. Make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and my son. And she, of course, her first thought is, I don't think I was clear about this. We weren't having seconds. This wasn't a multi-course meal. This is a piece of bread for me and my son to split. And did I mention the and then die part? But Elijah keeps going. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. You've got a little jug, and you've got a little thing of flour, and it's going to last as long as it has to last. And the widow goes, This is an interesting dilemma. But you think about it, it's not as hard as you might think. Because if you're down to your last piece of bread, you might as well play the lottery, right? You might as well take the risk. Here, dude. I'm going to give you. If you think this is going to happen, I'll give you the last piece of bread, because the other option is die. So I'm going to put my lot with you. So she went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. There was food every day. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. And they just keep eating. And recognize, the drought lasted 3.5 years. Now, we don't know how long each stage took, but I'm saying the brook would have dried up within a year. The creeks where I'm from, they're not going to last more than a year without rain, right? So the creeks died up in a year. So he's going to be with her for 2 to 2.5 years. They probably got tired of bread, but it beat starving to death by a whole lot. Okay? So they're in this routine. She puts builds a little apartment on top of her house, which was normal then, for him to stay in. He'd climb a ladder up to the roof, and that would be his room, and he would stay up there. And then sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. The boy became ill. He grew worse and worse and finally stopped breathing. He dies. Not of starvation, of dying, which happened. She said to Elijah, "What have you against me, man of God?" Her belief would be that you were punished for sins. God was always around zapping people for sins. And if God's going to take her son, she had done something wrong, and God was zapping her for it. And apparently Elijah the prophet had kind of squealed on her and told God about some sin she'd committed, so therefore God killed her son. Did you come, like he says, did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son? Elijah didn't see this coming. Best we can tell, there's no evidence he was like, oh, this is going to happen on Tuesday. It wasn't on his calendar or anything. But he says, give me your son, Elijah replied. He took him from her arms, carried him up to the upper room where he was staying, on top of the house, laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die? Like I said, he's dead. Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him. And the Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. And Elijah picks up the boy, the child, and carries him down the ladder from the room to the house. He gave him to his mother and said, look, your son's alive. Now, I hate to break this to you. I did all this for this next verse. This next verse is the one I want to talk about. The rest of the stuff, I'm just telling you the story. I'm just letting you know what all happened. I'm giving you all the background to this one verse, because this one verse is the one that made me go, whoa, when I read it about a year ago. Okay, because I do what I call journaling. Everybody calls it journaling, where I read the Bible and I look for what God wants to say to me. And as I'm reading, I'm looking for something that surprises me, something that I'm like, oh, I didn't see that one coming. That's one of the things I'm looking for. When the Holy Spirit will say, Steve, why is that in there? And so let's recap what's happened so far. We've got a widow and her young boy. She is prepared to what? Go home, make one piece of bread, eat the bread, and die. That's her strategy at this point. It hasn't rained in years at this point, okay? Probably at least 2 years. Her son dies. Well, back up a second. It hasn't rained in 2 years, but their one jug of milk and their one loaf of bread, to put it in our terms, you know, because if there's a hurricane coming, what do you got to go get? Milk and bread, same thing. So the one jug of milk and the one loaf of bread has never stopped. Every time she turns the jug of oil up, oil comes out for years. It's a little jug. It should be empty by now. For years. Every day. A couple times a day. Maybe 3 times a day on special days. She gets oil from this jug and she gets flour. And she makes bread. Every day. For years. Then her son dies. Elijah prays, the first resurrection in the Bible. Boy's raised from the dead. And now listen to what she says. Listen, this is amazing. She says, now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. Now. She finally got it. What all had she been through? What all had God done? But now she got it. And what I want to talk today, this was introduction to the sermon. I hope you don't mind. Imagine how long the sermon, if that's the introduction. But anyway, this isn't weird. It's not odd at all for a person to go through a number of stages that should seem to be almost in themselves sufficient before they come to where God really wants them to be. And I call it the 4 steps of faith. That's what the name of the sermon is. Ta-da, we finally got to the title. Congratulations, you made it. Okay? And we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about the 4 steps of faith. And this is going to be, I think, my prayer is some lives are seriously changed today, over the next few weeks, because of what you're going to learn today from the Bible, okay? Not some weird Steve stuff. This is what the Bible says, and I want you to see it, and it's what I've observed, and I want you to see it, okay? Because I've believed for years, and I'm right, because I'm not the only one who believes that it's true. There are steps in your spiritual journey, right? Okay? And for most people, there are steps towards salvation, and there are steps after salvation. Like, I wrote an article once about, I had some friends when I was working in Philadelphia, and one of them was Hindu. And for him to go from where he was as a kind of semi-compliant Hindi to a committed Christian, that's probably not going to happen on one Sunday at church, right? There's probably more than one step in this process. So let me just walk through because the woman goes through these steps. And the first step, faith begins when we choose to believe in God. One God. Okay? For my friend who is Hindu, that was the first step he would need to take, right? He'd have to go from believing, because Hindus believe in lots and 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 lots. I don't know if you knew this. Lots and 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 lots of gods. They don't believe in like 7. It is like million gods. Okay? It's a lot of gods. And this woman would have believed in how many gods? As many as there were. She would have believed in Baal, for sure. She would have believed in Ashtoreth, this consort. She would have believed in little other gods. She would have believed that most of the towns around her or nations around her had their own gods. And the first thing that has to happen is she has to recognize that Elijah's God is different. It's moving from small g God to big G God. Okay, that's all this is. That there is one true God. Okay, remember this and keep it firmly in mind. This is Deuteronomy. The Lord is God, both in heaven and on earth, and there is no other. And there are a lot of people, there may be some people listening here who believe in lots of gods or haven't been committed that there is a God. Or if you believe there is a God, you don't believe that the God is the God of the Bible. You believe in one really big God. Watching another stupid show, because that's the majority of them, especially when they come to faith things, and the person said something along the lines of, they want you to go tell this person's become somehow a prophet, said, I want you to go tell everybody that all religions are right. And I'm like, all religions can't be right. Because if one religion says there are millions of gods, and one religion says there's only one God, they can't both be right. This is not me being judgmental. This is just me being a plain old logical human being. Okay, if one person says you're allowed 11 players on your football team and the other says you're allowed 13, somebody's wrong. And you're going to get punished for having the wrong number of players on the field. Right? That's not me being judgmental. That's just a reality. There are things that between the religions that conflict with each other. There are things that just cannot be true. At the same time, it cannot be true that Jesus is the only way to God and that all roads lead to God. Now, I'm not saying that I'm right in saying Jesus is the only way to God, although I think I am. I'm saying I can't be right at the same time the person who's saying all roads lead to God is saying it. We can't both be right. All religions can't be right. I don't mean everybody who believes a different religion is an idiot or a terrible person. I'm just saying somebody has to be right and somebody has to be wrong, because logic. Okay? And the first step is to come to that belief that there is a God, and in some sense that God is the God of the Bible. But unfortunately, that's not enough. That's just step one. Because in James it says this, and I apologize, James can be so crude. But in the book of James, he says this: you say you have faith, for you believe there is one God? Good for you. Even the demons believe this, and they tremble in fear. He's such a smart aleck. He was Jesus' brother. I guess if you're Jesus' brother, you got to grow up as a smart aleck. That's the only way to function. Okay, so he grows up as a real smart aleck, and he's like, you believe there's a God? Well, isn't that special? I mean, I'm not trying to be mean to somebody who believes in God but hasn't moved to Jesus, but recognize that's not a final state. That just believing God, it bothers me just a little bit when somebody tries to identify that and say that they're a Christian by saying, yeah, I believe in God. Well, I'm always going to reply, but I never do because I'm a nice person. Well, good for you. Even the demons believe that and tremble, because that's a first step toward faith, but it's not the result of faith. It's not the purpose of faith, okay? Because just believing in God isn't enough, because faith doesn't become real until we accept Jesus, okay? Being all judgmental today, I apologize, but that's kind of like what the book says, and it's really logical. And Jesus did this thing where he rose from the dead. And I have this basic rule in life. This is how I do it all the time. Anytime this situation comes up, When I have to make a choice between two options and two people, if one of them rose from the dead, I'm going with him. It's just a rule in life. I do it every time. Anytime I encounter somebody who rose from the dead, I just go with them. Okay? And so Jesus rose from the dead. I'm going with him. Okay? And faith comes when we accept Jesus. Just one verse. The scriptures declare that we are all prisoners of sin. We're all stuck. So we receive God's promise of freedom only by believing in Jesus Christ. Okay? When I go from believing in God to accepting Jesus, to believing in Jesus, to saying, okay, Jesus is the only way to heaven. Jesus took all my sins on himself on the cross, and he died paying the penalty for all of my sins. And 3 days later, he rose from the dead so I could have a new life. That's what I believe. That's what I accept. And I believe it strongly. But this isn't enough. It's a step of faith. It's not the final step of faith or it's the most important step of faith. But I know so many Christians who this was the last step they took, and they're miserable. I know lots of people who take this step of faith, and over the years they just get less and less concerned about it, and eventually some of them walk away. It's kind of like going swimming. We've got a pool in our neighborhood, and they've got the 3-foot end all the way down to the 5-foot end. And you know what one of the least enjoyable things to do is? I'm 5'9", 5'10", somewhere in that zone. It is insanely unenjoyable to go into the 3-foot end of the pool and just stand there. That is just miserable. Because you're hot everywhere except your ankles. Depending on your height, maybe your knees. Because this is the heavy part. You weren't made to simply accept Jesus. There has to be another step. For some people, that step is something that happens quickly. For some, it's slowly over time. For some people, they get saved and they got it. But faith is not transformed until, I don't know how to say it, till we get Jesus. Till we move to understanding that he is the way, the truth, and the life. Okay? Now, this woman didn't get Elijah before, right? Elijah's kind of standing in for Jesus in that story. Because Elijah comes in and says, believe in God. She believes in God. Now he says, now trust me. And so she trusts him for the oil and the bread every day. She trusts him. She's got a faith. But until her son rises from the dead, she doesn't get him. She goes, oh, now I get it. And the only happy Christians I know are the ones who eventually get it. That was probably too harsh, but I think it's true. The only Christians I know who are happy are the ones that eventually get it. Okay? This is how it's said in Deuteronomy. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to this command I'm giving you today. Wholeheartedly committed. A number of years ago, I was working in Research Triangle Park, and there was a guy I worked with. Great, I love the guy, great guy. And he had, before he came to work with us at Sumitomo, was the name of the company. Before he came to work at Sumitomo, he had worked at, I don't know the name of the company, but they repaired car machines. I mean, the ones in Detroit that turn out cars, the ones that flip them over, turn them over, put the bolts here, those machines. He repaired those machines. That's what he did for a living, worked for a company. And he would go to Detroit every Monday. He would fly out from RDU. He would fly from RDU to basically Detroit pretty much every time. He'd fly to Detroit, and he'd spend all week repairing those machines, because when they break down, it's a big deal. They have to bring in somebody who knows what they're doing, and he would go do maintenance and repair those machines from Monday to Friday. And that's what he did all the time. He'd get up on Monday morning, he'd get on a plane, he'd fly out, he'd fly back on Friday, making good money. But he was married. And he said it had gotten to the point where he was more comfortable in a hotel room, bed alone, than in the bed with his wife. that the whole weekend was an uncomfortable, hard to get along with thing, and they both looked forward to him getting on a plane on Monday morning because they really didn't know how to live together anymore. Because, to be really honest about it, he wasn't committed to his marriage. Okay, he was committed to his job, not his marriage. I'm not saying people can't make that work. I'm saying for him, it did not work. He was not committed. And so he quit that job and took an enormous pay cut to work with us and save his marriage. Okay? Because prior to that, he didn't get marriage. He didn't understand it. And everybody I know who is a Christian who gets it is somebody who recognizes, well, how Jesus found. This is about, you guys have heard this story. This is the verse that got me. This is the verse that, when I got it, was this verse. Some of you guys don't know the story, so I'll tell you the story. And if you heard the story before, just pretend you haven't, okay? The verse is, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. And I was 20 years old. I was already studying to be a pastor, and I was back home for summer from college, and my dad was preaching. He was a pastor. And this was his text. And he only got to here for me. He said, seek first the kingdom of God. He's reading King James. Seek first the kingdom of God. I didn't hear another word he said. I was done. I spent the rest of the day, literally the rest of the day, meditating on seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. That's all I heard. By the end of the day, I got it. By the end of the day, everything about me had changed. I had been a Christian before, and I was still a Christian, but I got it. I literally went back to my Christian college where I was studying to be a pastor, and all my best friends said, what happened to you? You're a different person than you were when you left for the summer. You're nicer. You care more. You're different. Because I finally got it. And that's where Christianity starts really working. And I know this. I don't have to say it. I think there's probably some people here. I know there are people here. I know there are people online. And you have accepted Jesus, but you've never gotten Jesus. You've never said, now I know. I guess this is how Pastor Aaron put it. Following Jesus isn't something I do, it's who I am. And until you get to that spot, and I'm not going to be judgmental about this because it takes people a while. Like I said, some people go overnight, they have an instantaneous event. Some people, as soon as they're saved, they get it. Some people take years and years and years. But some of you are absolutely miserable in your faith because this isn't true. Because faith, following Jesus, is just something you do sometimes even. Here's a passage that I kind of pray for so many people. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened. Now I know just how big, just how awesome God is, just how amazing Jesus is, just how worth it is to say, I'm not someone who follows Jesus. I am a follower. I don't just follow Jesus. It's not something I do. It's who I am. And I know a lot of you people, that's a true statement for you. I'm not judging and saying, all right, you're this way. I'm asking you to consider that yourself. Okay? The eyes of your heart may be enlightened. Okay, so let me go one more point. I'm going to draw something so you can see it. Because we talked about 3 levels, right? There's believe. There's accept. And there's get. Because there's one more thing I need to talk to you about rather quickly. Because once you get, the journey's not over. Because we swim in a river of life and culture, and the current from that culture is always pulling us this way. And there is a constant tendency to move away from that getting. There's a constant pull on us from our culture, from everything around us, to pull us away from an absolute commitment to Christ to something much, much less. And all of us are susceptible for, and all of us sometimes get caught up in the current and recognize we've moved from getting it to accepting it. That we've moved from being somebody who is totally committed to Christ to somebody who's pretty much committed to Christ. All of us do it. And the answer is that faith is renewed when we remember Jesus. I misspelled remember. When we remember. Revelation 2:4. I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had at first. All of us are constantly called to cheat on Jesus. We're constantly pulled away. And our job is to constantly be moving back toward him. So once you get it, I don't want you to feel like, I'm done. No. Life sucks. Stuff's constantly coming at you. The cultural currents always flow away from God. There is a constant pull from our culture to move you away from God, from God's standards, from God's love. In our culture right now, I mean, if I say God's love, is culture in favor of God's love? No. It's about hate and anger and, I've been working on this. Some of you guys will recognize this joke because it's a really old joke, but I've reconfigured it for the 21st century. Okay, so these two guys are on the Appalachian Trail, and they're hiking, and the one looks over and he notices on the other guy's backpack there's a fish, and he notices that just as they start across this bridge, one of those beautiful Appalachian views, this beautiful bridge, and walk across the bridge, and there's goes, "Hey, are you a Christian?" He goes, "Yeah," and they go, "Me too, cool. What church do you go to?" He says, I'm picking a specific group. He says, First Baptist of Des Moines. "Oh, great, I go to First Baptist Houston." "Oh, that's fantastic. Are you guys elder-led or pastor-led?" "We're elder-led." "Oh, great, that's fantastic." "Well, us too. Do you believe in closed communion or open communion?" "Closed communion, brother, closed communion. Nobody but the saints." "Oh, great, me too." "Well, which translation do you read, ESV or NASB?" That guy says, "ESV." And the first guy pushes him off the bridge. Because while the cultural currents flow away from God, even the religious culture will flow away from God a lot of times. It'll flow toward legalism. It'll flow toward fundamentalism. It'll flow toward no rules at all. It'll flow toward emotionalism instead of reality. Or it'll flow toward moving you into where you're just into every detail and all the logic in the world and you don't love anybody. You know what I'm saying? There are cultures, there are currents flowing in your life, in my life, that move us away from getting Jesus. So, 4 steps. Number 1, believing there is a God. I hope if you're here or if you're watching, that you're already at least that step. If you're not and you'd like to talk about why I believe there is a God and why that's the way to go instead of all the other options, be glad, just shoot me an email. We can talk about it. Okay? Now, moving from believing in God to what? Accepting Jesus. And that's, we do that here. We talk about that in terms of a blue bag, right? Where we say, if you're ready to accept Jesus, to make a commitment to Christ, that initial decision for Christ, if you'd like to talk about it, if you think you're ready for it and would just like to talk about it, what we say is at the end of the service, you grab a blue bag. And there's blue bags there and a couple other places. I think I see some there and I see some there. And if you grab a blue bag, we've got some people that are trained, and they'll unpack the bag with you and take 7-10 minutes, something like that, and talk to you about how to move from just believing in God to accepting Jesus Christ. to asking Him to forgive you and start the process of turning you into the person He created you to be. We always say that. We also say you need to get baptized to express that commitment. Okay? So you believe there is a God. Then you accept Jesus. My passion today, though, and I've probably noticed this, is that some of you will move from the shallow end of the pool to the deep end when it comes to faith. You'll go from just having accepted Jesus to being with Jesus, okay? From following Jesus isn't something I do to following Jesus being who I am. And let me tell you, that's the better place to be. It's what you were made for. You were made to become like Jesus, and that only happens if you're totally committed to Jesus. I'm not saying you need to suddenly, go off and, go to seminary. I'm not saying you need to quit your job. I'm not saying you need to do anything weird at all. It's just where I am right now, am I fully committed to living Jesus here? It's for most people, it doesn't involve life change on the circumstances on the outside. It involves transformation on the inside. It's not working in a different place. It's working differently in the place where you are. And I'm challenging you. If you don't quite get it, okay, ask God to start speaking to you. Now I know. My prayer for you, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ who's accepted Him but never moved to getting it, my prayer for you today is that you get it. And for those of you who've already gotten it, there's going to be some here in this room right now who have the streams of cotton and moved them a little bit recently. And I'm not going to judge you. I'm not judging anybody for those things. That happens. That's how the world is designed to pull you away from God. But when you recognize you're in the wrong place, what do? You move, right? If you're in the wrong place, if you've drifted, God's not going, I'm going to zap you for that. God's saying, come on back. Come on back. This is where you're supposed to be. So which of the 4 steps do you need to take today? So you may not need to, some of you may not need to, but we'll just pretend. Everybody has to take one of 4 steps today. Do you need to move to believing in God? Do you need to accept Jesus? Grab a blue bag and accept Jesus today? Do you need to start digging in and getting Jesus? Now I know. Is that the prayer you need to pray? God, show me. I want to know. I want to get it. Frankly, I'm praying because I think God could be working in some hearts right now where you don't need to talk to anybody. It's clicking. It's clicking for you right now. You go, oh my gosh. Makes sense now. I'm praying for that. And some of you may need to say, I need to swim back to the center. I need to move against the current and go back to Jesus. That's what I'm going to pray for you today. Let's go ahead and pray. Father, thank you for this woman, this widow. Thank you for what she teaches us. Father, for the people who are listening to my voice, who haven't really committed to believing in a God, they're kind of living in the nebula, I pray that today they would make that decision at least. Father, for the ones who believe in a God, who believe in the God, but have never accepted Jesus, Father, I pray today would be the day. If they're here in the auditorium, that they grab a blue bag. If they're online, that they contact us, steve@sproutsprings.org, so we can set up a conversation where we can do that online and unpack that blue bag with them. And Father, for the ones here who are Christians, they have a relationship with Jesus, but they've never gotten it. Jesus has never moved from being part of their lives to being all of their lives. I pray today that you're working. How many people at least make a step in that direction today? I pray that some people are going to come out of here so changed that people who know them are going to come to them saying, what happened to you? Because of what's going to happen to them in the next days and weeks. And Father, for the ones of us who may have been alerted to the fact that we've kind of slipped over the past few weeks or months or years, We need to get back to the center. I pray you'd help us have